Welcome, everyone. I am Courtney Cheetah, and I'm a program associate with Wild Farm Alliance. Thanks for joining us today for the Whole Farm Sustainable Pest Management course. This is the 11th course of 12, and our mission is to promote a healthy, vibrant agriculture that protects and restores wild nature. And we help bring wild nature back to farms. And just a reminder that all participants are muted. If you're experiencing any technical issues, there are moderators in the chat to help, and also to use the chat to ask questions for the presenters as well. Feel free to do that. Our 2050 vision is to see 1,000,000 nest boxes and perches on farms, hedgerows of habitat to the length of the moon and back, and to help support all the different kinds of beneficials on the farm and restoring the riparian areas because they're the lifeblood of the landscape. And we really see that avian pest control is part of the toolbox for managing crops here at Wild Farm Alliance. Next, I want to share with you a new resource that we're building and invite you to join us. If you are an expert in sustainable pest management and would like to showcase your expertise to growers, potential clients, complete this profile builder, and your location will be shared on an interactive map with detailed pop-up information, enabling growers to quickly find experts specializing in their crops, addressing their unique needs, and located in their areas. And what's really exciting about that is that it's live. The directory is up. If you're looking for sustainable pest management experts, you can now find a pest control advisor or certified crop advisor nearby you in the SPM directory. So feel free to check that out as well. And then today we are here for a day in the life of Scouts and a PCA with Doug O'Brien, Jessica Vaughn from Vaughn Grower Consulting, and Jim Davis from Better Bugs IPM. The last of this series is coming up in 2 weeks. That will be on March 11th. Sustainable Pest Management encompasses whole farm systems thinking with David Hendrick from Cal Poly, and the pest control advisor Devin Carroll will be here with us in 2 weeks to talk about that. So that's great. We're wrapping up this webinar series already. If you are looking for other continuing education credits, feel free to go back and look at some of the other webinars that we've done in this series. They've been really great. They're all under the online courses, under news and events on our website. We have continuing education credits available from DPR and ASA. And if you're seeking those credits, we'll have pop-up polls after each speaker that we'd like you to participate in. And at the end, we'll have a link to a quiz and evaluation form where you can share your license numbers with us for the CEU credit. Next, I'm going to pass this off to Jim first. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you're having any issues, let us know. And I'll give it over to you, Jim.
Okay. So as Courtney said, today I'm going to be talking to you about what are Scouts and PCAs, a day in the life of a Scout and a PCA. Actually, I guess this is, there we go, there's our starter screen. When I think about this, I was thinking, well, what do I do all day? How do I do it? And why am I doing it? And so I want to talk a little bit about that. This begs the question, what are Scouts and PCAs? PCAs and Scouts pretty much do the same thing. We go and look through farmers' plants or their farming operation and try to find ways that we can either anticipate and stop pest problems or deal with other issues on the farm to help the farmer be profitable and productive. So we often will work with fertilizer plans or other things, really depending on the PCA situation. And so PCAs and Scouts are out there looking for potential problems, and then keeping records and comparing them with historical, and also trying to just make a decision: do we need to do anything about this in the short run? So how do we make decisions? Well, that we use. And once we make that decision, how do we support that decision to take us into action? So what we do first is we learn the plant and pest biology so that we understand the system we're working in. And then we go out into the fields and we start measuring. One thing we measure is plant health. So we're looking for any signs or symptoms that the plant may be suffering. Like this photo on the top shows micronutrient deficiency in citrus leaves, zinc and manganese. Interveinal chlorosis, or in the field in the lower picture, the weeds are kind of choking out the trees here, so we need to do some good weed control here. Then we start looking at measuring the pest population dynamics. So again, we're identifying the pest, like in this top picture here, or using some type of trapping device. The one on the lower right or left is a bucket trap, and I use these to trap moths. So I put a pheromone that dangles from the top of the lid there, and I put some motor oil in the bucket itself, and there are 6 sex-attractant pheromones, so the moths come into the trap and get trapped in there. I can open up the bucket and count the moths to keep track of them. Or on the right of that photo is a yellow sticky card. So they're just kind of a blunder trap. They don't really, they may or may not have a pheromone depending on the species, but the insects get trapped on the sticky card and then you can evaluate them. So we also assess the leaf color and size to make sure about our nutrient status. And we look at variations of the plant health over the entire farm that we're working on to see where the problem areas are and where we can have an impact on increasing productivity. In our scouting. And so you want to create a scouting pattern that fits the crop and the pest. So here's an example of a block that I have. It's right beside a housing complex. And the red line shows my scouting pattern. So you see the road that bisects these 2 sections of the grove. I pull in there on the left and I do a little loop there on that smaller lobe, and then I cross the street and go around. So I try to get to all the portions of the grove so I can make my samples and know that I've looked at almost every section, that there's no place where the pest is going to be able to build up with numbers without me being able to find it. And also by doing that over time, I find out where the pest usually enters the field in the first place. Most often for us, or for me, that is on the west side of the field, since the wind here is generally westerly, and the flying pests and other pests generally will blow in from the west. But in every grove, there's unique features that help you identify where the most likely place is, because that's a place you definitely want to check when you're scouting, since it'll be the leading indicator of the pest maybe becoming a problem. So here's some examples of different types of fields that you might scout with different methods. So in the upper left, that is one where it's just a sort of a general scouting pattern. So I enter the field on the lower left, and then I walk along that left edge. I go over and sample the right edge or the east edge, and then I go up to the north edge, and then I make a little loop sort of through the center, and then back down on the west edge. So if there's something in particular about the pest that makes it more prominently going to be in one part of this field than another, for instance, in the upper right photo, if I'm expecting the pest to mostly be on the west side, to come in on the west, then I'll go over and sort of scout through the middle of the grove, and then loop back and do more concentrated on the west. If I think that the pest is predominantly on the edges, I'll use that photo on the lower right, where I just go in, I just sample the edges, and if I think that the pest is only going to be on one side of the field predominantly. Again, in that lower left photo, uh, I would scout if I think it's going to be on the south edge, then I'd scout more intensively along the south edge, and then I just do a general loop through the other sections to make sure I'm not missing any problems. So you want to develop scouting methods and treatment thresholds for the pests that are most important for the crop you're going to be scouting. And generally, the university will generate a set of methods to use. And I find these good as a start. Methods to fine tune them for the fields that I'm operating in and for my scouting methods and the way I do things. So that's really sort of a constant problem or a constant ongoing process is fine-tuning your scouting methods to make sure you're efficient and accurate. So to me, the most important thing about scouting is that I want to satisfy my curiosity. And your curiosity is your best ally. You want to cultivate that in yourself and in other scouts because that's going to motivate you to find out what's going on in the field and make sure that you do not miss the important things that are going on. So when you're out there, you want to satisfy your curiosity. One of the entomology professors I know, his phrase is, when in doubt, continue to scout. So if you're scouting and you're reaching a treatment threshold, but you're not quite over it yet, and you're sort of on the fence, do I need to treat? Do I not need to treat? Then you want to continue your scouting techniques, make another loop, do whatever you have to do to get to the point where you're sure that you either do or do not need to make that treatment. And then make notes on that because it's likely the next time you come to that field, you may be in the treatment zone. So, but you want to satisfy your curiosity and make sure that you understand what's happening there. Okay, so we use treatment thresholds, and these are generally worked out by the university. But again, you want to revise them as your experience tells you to. Either up or down. On the right here is a picture of one of my scouting reports. So this is what I send to the growers. I list on the left the different key pests and what their current status is. And I have my program puts just English words in there for the type of the pest level and distribution. And I also have a comment section where I can make comments directly about the farmer's own property. And then that bottom section, the overview, that is an area where I put something that I want everybody in the industry to know, all my clients to know. It's something that's happening. If there's a big weather event or something's happened in the regulatory environment, then I put that in there. So it's sort of a industry-wide area where I can comment. So you want to use the treatment threshold because that allows you to put the control strategy in place before the damage happens. And you can see in this upper slide of avocado thrips that the pest built up and it was just about to go in my last scout over to the treatment threshold across the line of treatment. So I treated that grove, and then you can see in the one after that, the pest dropped off as the pesticide took place. But another pest below that, Persea mite, is beginning to build up and may need to be treated later on. So by understanding the biology of the situation and the flexible treatment thresholds that you are developing, you can make that treatment threshold account for the other factors in the system. For example, if you have a predator of your major pest and it's been on the rise as the pest has been growing, then the rate of damage by the pest may be decreasing. And so you might be able to just get by with letting that predator control the pest without exceeding the damage threshold of the client. So again, your time and knowledge and experience help you determine which way you want to go on this. So once the threshold has been crossed, or at least is close to it, then you want to call the grower, or I call the grower, and I discuss the different treatment options, what their effectiveness that can be expected, and what the pros and cons are for each one, the costs and everything, so that we can together decide on a treatment strategy. And then I write up that strategy as the recommendation. And then once I've written that recommendation, if it requires a pesticide application, I send that recommendation to the grower, and the pesticide dealer, and the pesticide applicator. And then, if necessary, I make a map for the applicator to tell them where the actual spray is going to be. And afterwards, I evaluate the treatment. So I want to inspect and record all the treated plants to record the efficacy of the treatment. And I do that over time because I want to see, on a short run, after a week, after a couple of weeks, how does that treatment look? And then I also want to track the effects of this on different predators and parasites to determine the impact of that on the different stages of the insect, and learn what that pesticide does to the beneficial insects that I'm counting on for most of the pest control that takes place. So by doing that, you'll reveal the actual compatibility of the pesticide to each of these natural enemies that are in your cropping system. And so you can observe these secondary effects on fecundity, longevity, the insect's ability to locate the prey, as ways that these prey get, or the predators and parasites get influenced by pesticide application. Because you want to know all the effects of the changes you're making on the farm, so that you can, in the future, predict what they are and make sure that they become part of an effective program and not something that causes problems by themselves. One of your, in California anyway, our main regulatory person for me is my county agricultural commissioner. I have to retain records of my recommendation so I can show them to any of the inspectors for the commissioner on demand. And I've used primarily an online service called TELUS Agronomy to write my recommendations. It's all online, and it serves as the record retention mechanism for these recommendations. And the commissioners all have continuous access to my account, so they can monitor and check any recommendations that they'd like to make sure that I'm doing my job properly. Also, the commissioner is the one to contact if you have any questions about any regulations or to report possible violations. And so as a PCA or a scout, you have a number of ongoing resources. We have continuing education, classes like this one to learn about the latest things and to talk to other people in the business to improve your own professional understanding. We also have professional organizations. In California, we have CAPCA, California Association of Pest Control Advisors, and also PAPA, the Professional Applicators Association, and others. There are many trade groups. And also the University of California's Cooperative Extension, or the Cooperative Extension agents in whatever state you live in. Most states have a big agricultural field have cooperative extension agents. And so they can be very useful and are a way to get into the university research and to also find out about research projects in your commodity, so that you can be aware of the latest techniques and try those out on your own clients. And lastly, the agricultural commissioner is always there to talk about different regulatory actions, or possibly new introductions of pests or quarantines or things like that that may happen. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Again, I think we're going to have a question and answer period here. I think it's coming at the end. Is that right, Courtney?
Yes, we'll do that. We're going to first launch the poll questions that go with your talk. Okay, we've hit a pretty good threshold there. So we can end the poll and share the results. Jim, do you want to go over these?
Sure. So that first question, the most correct answer is when in doubt, continue to scout. Although I know PCAs that have use all these as mottos, which is why I included them. But for me, that's the best answer, the first one. In the second answer, there are a number of different choices here, but the one that I had talked about is to call the grower and discuss treatment options. You do not have to notify the county when you make a pest control recommendation, but I can understand why people might think that that's something that they have to do. But in fact, in California anyway, you do not have to notify the county. The pesticide applicators have to notify the county before they do an application, but the pest control advisors do not have to notify the county. They just have to have records that are available to the county.
Great. Looks like people are paying attention. That's awesome. If you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll loop back around at the end of the next talk and come back and answer those. I'm going to hand it off to Doug next.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jim. That was great. I love hearing from other scouts because we all do things a little bit differently, but some things really resonate. And the thing about curiosity, that is my thing, and that's what makes scouting to me so much fun. Is just really being able to be curious every day and indulge in it. Anyway, Jessica and I are going to kind of teach the next part. And this is a day in the life of whole farm scouts. And that's what Jessica and I are. We aren't PCAs. So let's go to the next slide. So what is whole farm scouting? So it can be anything you want, but the way Jessica and I think of it is that we scout the whole farm. So this means not just the pests, but the beneficial organisms. We look closely at the crop health and the soil health. So the whole farm. And we do it frequently, we do it intensely, and most of all, we do it objectively so that when we have a problem, we try to get real objective samples, which means putting numbers to what we're actually finding. So 10 out of 20, 3 out of 15, things like that, rather than just, boy, there's a lot of pests. And we do whole farm scouting for many years. And that means that we're coming back frequently. So a scout, in our mind, gets associated with a farm. So instead of just doing it for a season, it's a whole year or many years. And we capture, and then after we've been doing this for a long time, and by capturing the observation data digitally, we end up with this really extensive knowledge base, which really reflects the uniqueness of every farm. And particularly if you're working in organic or regenerative, farms are unique, and they end up having different pest thresholds, kind of like what Jim was talking about. You start with the government ones or the ones online, but you very quickly modify them for your particular farm. So whole farm scouting is something that tries to encompass everything that's going on and do it for a long time so that you have the very best recommendations and management for the uniqueness of a particular farm. So what we're going to cover today is how to scout intensely and objectively, and that's what I'll be covering. And then Jessica will come in and show you how to use a digital scouting template that we've developed that makes collecting this digital information so much easier and so much more useful. So let's start with how to scout intensely and gosh, what was the other word? It went too quick. Go back there, Jessica. Intensely and objectively. Yes, thank you. So just like Jim was talking about curiosity, for me, when you want to scout a farm, the most important thing is to be concentrating. So that means you're concentrating on being curious, which means that you're expecting the unexpected. So the things that you haven't seen before, you've maybe never seen before. And then also you're expecting the expected. Once you've been scouting whole farm for a while, you begin to see the rhythm of the pests and the beneficial insects, and when the soil is dry and when the crops are growing well, the seasonal effects. So it's kind of messes with your mind a little bit because you're expecting um, things that you've seen over and over again, but you also want to have your mind really open to seeing something brand new. And the way I approach, or the way Jessica and I approach scouting farms, is kind of a three-part system. First, we look far, then we look near, and then we look close. And looking far is what you see on the left there, the far left photo, where you're standing at the edge of the field and you can almost see the end of the row. So many, many plants, but you're not looking at any individual plant. Looking near is the second photo there of the Napa, where you actually can see individual plants, but you haven't got down on your hands and knees and looked at them. And then the middle photo there of the Napa is where you're starting to look at an individual plant. You've got down on one knee or both knees, and you're starting to really examine that particular plant. So far, near, close. And then expecting the unexpected is this little Bagrata bug on Jessica's knife on the right, which was something we hadn't expected. And there it was, and she saw it because she was expecting the unexpected. So looking far is probably the easiest part. This is where you look at many plants. So we're at the edge of the field, we're looking down, and we're looking far because we're trying to decide exactly how we're going to walk through this field. And so we're scanning the whole block as we approach for it, and we're looking for abnormalities in the field. So areas of pale, less dense vegetation, odd colors. And the reason we're looking for those is because that's where we want our walk to eventually take us, but we don't want to focus on those areas exclusively because, again, we're looking to see what's really in that field, not just what's in that one spot. Next slide, please. Looking near. Now, looking near to me is a very critical part of the scouting process. It starts with entering the field, and we're trying to be efficient and effective and quick. We never want to enter the same spot consecutively. This is a little bit different than Jim, who's scouting these long-term tree groves where he actually has a path. We actually don't want a path because we're scouting so frequently that we want to have a view of almost the entire field. So we keep track of whether we entered on the north end or the south end, for example. If we entered in the north end on Monday, we're coming in on the south end on Wednesday. We're choosing a border between two different blocks when possible. So in this particular field, we have lacinato kale on the left and green kale on the right. We're going to scout both of them. We could walk into the lacinato kale, or we could walk into the curly kale, or we can walk in that furrow between the two. And by walking in the furrow between the two, as we're glancing and walking and looking near, that means looking at a bunch of plants as we walk by, we're capturing both of those, which is much more efficient. So we've decided we're going to enter in between the lacinato kale and the curly kale. So where do we go? Well, this is something that I just developed over 25 years, is that I'm interested in the edges, but honestly, we're scouting so frequently that we really want not really the edges, we want the whole field. So we like to go in 1 to 3 pipes. So this means 20 to 60 feet, a pipe being 20 or 30 feet long. And that allows us to look at the edges as we're passing by, but then to actually be in the field beyond the edges when we really begin scouting. Now, if we can, and we don't have tree rows or hedges or fences or whatever, we like to walk laterally through the field. So we enter 1 to 3 pipes, and then we start walking across and over the rows of crop. And then we begin walking near, which is what you see when you're still standing up, but you're walking along. So again, those Napa, that's what you'd see in the Napa as you're walking near. You're observing multiple plants as you walk, and then you need to make the determination, are you going to stop to look close or are you not? And this is one of the things that a whole farm scout becomes really good at. Certain crops like parsnips, Jessica and I very rarely look close. Um, Parsnips have few problems where we scout, and it would take seeing something looking near that made us want to examine the crop more closely. There are other things where you always look close, things where there are almost always problems that you can't see from standing up and you need to get down on one or both knees to look. So this is where your experience comes in. I can't tell you when it's going to be time to stop close or to look close, but you will learn over time. Now, one of the techniques we do to save time is that if the blocks are less than about 12 by 40-inch beds wide, we keep going laterally, and this allows us to scout multiple blocks before walking back out of the field. If it's more than 12, generally it's better to back out and re-enter. But if it's less than 12, and a lot of the fields we look at have, half-acre plantings, quarter-acre plantings, this is a really efficient way to see a lot of stuff really quickly. High noon is best because it avoids shadows and low light. But the nature of our work is that really you want to get out there as soon as you can, but you cannot do it in the dark. You can't do it in the dim light. You really need some light. Um, we scout a little bit less in the winter than we do in the summer. A lot of things depend on soil temperature, and everything happens when it's faster when it's warm. So we can't scout often enough in the spring, summer, and fall, but we let up a little bit in the wintertime. Already said that. Okay. Cutting corners. Yes, all scouts cut corners, but I think it's really important to realize that when you windshield a crop or you don't look at it carefully, you are taking a risk, and you need to match the taking of that risk to the risk of losing the crop and what is important to your farmer. Again, whole farm scouting means that you develop this long-term relationship with the farmer. You know what their tolerance to risk is, and you try to match your acceptance of risk to that of the farmer you're working with. Looking close. This is where we get our objective estimates that I talked about before. So this means that if we find something that we want to look at more closely, such as if you look at the top left photo there, there's a tiny little pustule of rust. This is where we get our objective estimates, where we're actually going to look at 10 or 20 plants and count how many of how much rust there is, for example, in the garlic there. So we might look at 20 garlic plants, find 2 plants with rust pustules, 2 out of 20, that is our objective estimate. When you look close, I always tell people get in there. It's not just looking at the plant. You need to touch them most of the time. We often do destructive harvesting, so we have our knives out and we're cutting things and bringing them up closely to our faces. We're looking on leaves, the undersides, the internal leaves of heading crops. Most of the action in pest management is on either old or young leaves. Keep that in mind. The buds, they're tasty and fast growing. Because they're tasty, the insects like to congregate there. If there's problem in the roots, split them open. Look inside. You see a lot of the vascular tissue in roots. Bring a knife or a shovel, glasses, hand lens, all really important. And as I said, on the bottom left there are people getting in there under the covers to really see what's going on. All right, that's it for the technique. Then Jessica's going to show you what you do with all this information you're gathering out there and a way in which you can capture it easily, digitally, and quickly. Thank you.
All right, cool. So thank you, Doug, as always. So I'm going to just give you guys a little walkthrough of the technology that we use to capture our sample data quickly and efficiently while we're in the field. So this is a look at what our template looks like. You guys will get a link to this template if you'd like to use it yourself. It is a Google Sheet. It is free and is fully customizable. The benefit of using this Google Sheet as a template is that you have the same instance of this sheet on your phone as you do on your laptop or desktop because the sheet exists in the cloud. So you can see there are a few tabs on this template. If you look along the bottom, that's because I like to keep a couple of other items in my template as they go. Often I keep maps on here for various branches, as well as there's a tab here called lists, which is one tab that holds all the lists that populate drop-down menus. So you guys may be able to see these little upside down triangles indicating that there's a drop-down menu for each one of these columns, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to use those. And those function completely as well on the mobile app, and they can be used offline. So this is one element of whole farm scouting and our digital recording that is critical to us, is our ability to be able to capture data online and offline, because so many of the farms that we work for, have limited data signal. So if you are operating offline, in some cases I do, and I put my phone in airplane mode, and the app is completely functional offline, and then all the data that I enter here then syncs with the cloud when I return to data signals, so that I can work with this template when I get back to my office. So just talking about, there are this header row that exists in our template, and some of the abbreviations that we use and how we capture the data. So there is this first column here that's just called A, and this is an abbreviation for action item. And we use this column to indicate, we just add a 1 here, and this indicates that there's something in this row for this particular crop block and on this ranch that we want to talk to the grower about, or something that we want to remind ourselves of. In the ranch column, this is just, we just say R, but this is for ranch. All of the growers that we work with have multiple ranches, and it's important as you're keeping track of the data and recording it in the field that you know exactly where you are and which crop you're looking at, which is why we also have a drop-down menu here in the column called block. Every grower has typically blocks, and you'll notice that there are drop-down menu icons in a number of these columns. And these are columns where the information is important to have it precise, and we're going to use it a lot. So having a drop-down menu lets you be efficient without having to type in the data every time and risk actually entering it differently. Here in crop, you see that we have bok choy, and this would actually be a good instance to have a drop-down menu, because having the crop typed in the same way every time helps you keep clean data so that you can do effective data analysis. PN stands for planting number. This is something that we use for growers that plant successive crops of the same crop in the same block, so that we can, again, be sure that we're talking about the same exact planting when we're talking with the grower. So in this case, there were more than one planting of bok choy in this block on this ranch, and this was the second planting. So when I talked to the grower about this, I referred to, bok 2 when I'm talking about, essentially like what the pest situation was. Not all growers use this, but we do find this helpful for specifying and being clear about the actual crop we're talking about. PD stands for planting date. This is when the crop went in, whether it went in by seed or went in by transplant. This helps us differentiate in the field between similar or the same crops. I find this really helpful also for being able to expect when a crop should germinate, when it may come to harvest, and so on. Weeds and weed notes, these are 2 columns that can be used, don't have to be used. Again, you can customize this to your own uses. But in this case, with this grower, I was keeping track of weed severity, which was on a scale of 1 to 3, 3 being we need to do something about the weeds. And then I would provide notes about basically how we might go about getting rid of these weeds. And this helped provide the grower with some kind of way of planning what kind of crew they were going to send in the field to deal with the weeds, whether they're going to send in a manual field crew, hand crew, or they were going to send in, like the tractor operator with the cultivator. Finally, we have pests, amount per unit, and severity. So this is where you're capturing your sample data, where pest, which also has a drop down, is the pest that you're scouting. Amount being the number of plants in your sample, which is what PER stands for. Have this pest. Now, this is not the number of pests in each plant, but rather the number of plants in your sample with this pest. Unit being, what are you looking at? Are you looking at plants? Are you looking at flowers? Are you looking at leaves, etc.? This is where you will keep track of that. And severity, and this is something that both Jim and Doug have referred to, is how are you sort of honing your severity levels. And so for us, we use a severity scale of 1 to 5, 1 being this pest exists, 2 being this pest is increasing, 3 being this pest is at action threshold, meaning we need to take action now, 4 being this pest has gone beyond economic threshold, so trying to control it at this point is not necessarily economically viable, and 5 being this crop was lost to this pest. That's not something I've used very often. In fact, I can really think of only one example when we lost a block of early planted tomatoes to a surprise frost. And that means the crop was lost to the pest and the pest was frost. Pest notes and notes sometimes can be combined. For some of my growers, I separate them so that I can talk specifically about the pests. In this case, we had 5 and 10 plants with aphid. I noted that the pest was increasing because the previous count was lower than this one, and that there are small colonies of aphids. And beneficials, which I didn't necessarily talk about, I skipped over, but is also really important, is we're keeping track of pests and natural enemies that are relevant to the pest. So in this case, we saw aphid fungus in the aphid colonies, and this also helps play into what the severity level may be. If there were not any beneficials, this severity level would likely be higher. And then in the separate notes column, typically these are production notes. So, something that may help the crop to grow out better or otherwise. And then in treatment and treatment date, and this, again, we can have multiple columns for treatment dates. This is where we keep track of the treatments that go onto the crop so that we can be sure to, avoid crops that have been treated out, within their reentry interval, but then also so that we can go back and see how effective this treatment was. So knowing what went on and when helps us do that. So as we've been saying, we are capturing all this data in the field, and we kind of bucket that into 2 categories. One is we want to first capture where we were in the field. And so which ranch, block, crop, and which planting number are we looking at? We also, this is what Doug talked about before, we enter somewhere differently every time we come in. So we alternate north and south in the blocks. And then we want to capture what we saw. So what pest and what amount of that pest, what are the populations looking like, how severe, what are maybe natural enemies may exist, any notes about the pests and the crop that we've found. Now, there's lots of ways to customize this template to record farm data that's useful for your grower. In some cases, we use planting dates. We may track weeds. Tracking treatments and treatment dates can be helpful. It's basically, it's up to what's specific for your farm. So this is just a quick walkthrough, a mock-up of what it looks like to capture data on the phone. You can make an app of your scouting template for your phone, whether you're an iPhone or Android, it works for both. You go into the field, you click on your app, on your home screen, it opens up your scouting report that you've prepared. And then you go in and you update the data from your report that you've cut and pasted from your previous scout. So in this case, we're going to select aphid. This is how the drop-down menu works. So basically you just click on the down menu and then the whole menu of pests will pop up so you can quickly grab it and move on. When you get to the end of your scout, or let's say you've gotten here and you've decided you want to talk to the grower about this particular line item, you add a 1 to the A column or the action column because some action needs to be taken here. And when you get done with your whole scout and you have recorded all the action items, you select the column, you tap it to bring up the side menu, you select sort A to Z, and then all of your action items are sorted to the top. And this just gives you one place to look in order to, have a nice, quick, concise conversation with your grower. So for those of you who are interested in trying out this scouting template and potentially these techniques, You can add Google Drive and Google Sheets apps to your smartphone. You can go to this link here. This is a bit.ly link for our scouting template. What it will do is open up a view-only version of our template, our just general template for you. And you can follow the how-to instructions on the how-to tab to make a copy of it, customize it, and start using it for yourself. And then you can go to the field with your phone and start scouting. So thank you very much. That's what we've got.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing this great info. Let's launch the next set of poll questions for Jessica and Doug's presentations, and then I'll have you guys go over those once they've been answered. And Jessica, my quick question for you is, are you, and if you said this and I just missed it, I apologize, but are you using like an Excel spreadsheet, or are you using a specific software?
This is all in Google Sheets.
Okay, perfect. Nice. That makes it very easy and accessible.
Yes, and free. And
Yeah.
mobile, and it's all available offline.
Yep, exactly. That's awesome.
Well,
Yeah,
I got started in Excel, so I use an Excel spreadsheet for mine, and then I have a separate reporting program that takes that data from the scouting sheets and splices it in to make the report that I showed on the screen. So it's another way to present that information to the grower, because that's your client, that's the person that needs the information, and that you're there to serve. So you want to make sure that you're giving them the best product you can.
nice.
Yeah, I took a screenshot of your charts that you put up there, Jim. It's nice. I like the threshold line on there. That's really good.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, I was talking about that is actually kind of variable. You know, I put that on there. It's relatively static, but in my mind, I know that line's going up and down a little bit depending on circumstances.
Sure.
So as long as you're clear about what you're doing, then it's the tool serves you.
Great.
Awesome. Okay, let's close in the poll, and I think Doug's question is first and then Jessica's.
So you want me to discuss it, Courtney?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm afraid maybe this was just a little bit confusing, but when you're approaching a field, you don't want to be doing anything except parking your car or your truck. And so you're looking for the best place to enter the field, and it will depend on where you were the last time. And as I mentioned, you don't want to enter at the same place as you were last time. So the answer is the best place to enter the field.
Excellent. And Jessica, do you want to go over the second question?
Yeah, so the A column, this is the action item column. So we use it for action needed. So this is something that we want to communicate to the grower about what happened out in the field today. Action taken, that I can understand why we would think that, because we do check plantings for effects of a recent treatment, but that's not something we may end up wanting to talk about that with the grower. But that A column is for action needed.
Yeah, and if there are any questions, please put them in the chat. There we go. Okay. Do you guys have any favorite tools that you use when you're scouting?
Well, you saw there's a photo of me back there with a pair of very odd looking glasses on. It's an OptiVisor. Basically it's a 5x lens, but in the format of a pair of glasses that can go on top of my hat, so I can take them around with me. And those make looking for smaller insects like two-spotted spider mite and stuff like that on the underside of leaves a lot faster than using a hand lens. So that's definitely a favorite tool.
Yeah, for me, it would be the sweep net. You don't use it very often, but sometimes you just wish you could go in and you could just get a big sample of everything that's flying around or crawling around in that field. And sweep nets are just the only way to achieve that kind of information. And it's just so interesting, and it indulges your curiosity so much to sweep a field and find, uh, you know, 8 or 10 different order of insects, or 15 different bugs. So that's what I like.
Well,
Awesome.
I carry several different hand lenses. The hand lens definitely a very vital part because when you're after you look near and you find that there's something going on, you often need to get even closer. Especially some of the pests that I deal with are mites, spider mites, and eriophyid mites, which are very tiny, and so you need some type of magnification. So I actually typically carry a lens that has two 5-power lenses on it. So you can use them separately or combine them to make a 10-power lens. And that's my sort of regular lens that I carry. I can see almost all the pests in enough detail with that. But I also carry a 20 power and a 40 power lens if I want to really get deeper into it, especially with these small mites. We have a mite in citrus called the silver mite, which is really tiny. The first time I saw it, I thought it was just dust on the plant. They were so small. So you need to have good lenses to really be able to see what it is you're looking at and make sure that you're identifying it correctly.
That's great. If any audience members have questions, please be sure to put them in the chat so we can get to them with our speakers here.
While we're waiting for a second, there is something I wanted to mention that I didn't actually have in my presentation, and that is that I didn't actually say what a PCA was and what might differentiate it from a scout. We do the same kind of thing, but if you want to make a pesticide recommendation to a farmer, you have to have a pest control advisor's license. To get that license, there's an educational requirement, and then you have to serve a 1-year apprenticeship or internship, and then you're eligible to take the license exam. And you not only have to pass the laws and regs section to get the license, but you have to pass individual categories such as invertebrates, vertebrates, plant pathogens, weeds, things like that. And you can only write recommendations for pests that you have that category on your license. So it was really a method to try to bring professionalism into the whole field of agricultural pest control. Because before that, it was primarily pesticide salesmen were going out to the farms, and they'd find an insect and tell the farmer that you need to use this kind of pesticide. And so in the 70s, California switched over to this method of having a professional class, the pest control advisors, who are educated and well trained to make these pesticide decisions. Since we're essentially spraying poisons in the environment, we want to make a cadre of people that really understand and take that job seriously, and don't damage our environment, or at least minimize whatever damage we do.
Excellent. There's a question in the chat about how physically demanding do you find the typical workday of scouting, and Doug and Jessica chimed in. Jim, do you have any input on that?
Definitely, it's challenging. It's physically, it's a physical job. So you're outside pretty much every day, rain or shine. I typically don't work as much in the rain, and fortunately, it doesn't rain here a lot. If you live in a place where it rains a lot, you're going to be out there in the rain. So you got to be ready for whatever the day brings. I use an all-terrain vehicle, which I carry around in my truck. So I have to unload and load that at every farm. And that is a dangerous piece of equipment. I've had many spills on that. Fortunately, never been hurt badly, but it can be pretty scary. So you have to, be ready for that part of it. And then also, as Jessica was talking about, and then we're talking about the pattern they go through the field, and they're walking the field, and Even though I use the ATV, I get off of it on almost every farm to go deeper in to the trees and look at things more closely. But I can cover more ground in these orchards that way, and that's why I use that tool.
Excellent. We are just about out of time here, so I want to thank you all for sharing your knowledge. Thank you everyone for attending. We'd love to get your feedback, and if you need those CE credits, we need your license numbers. And the DPR credit requires that you take a quick 10-question quiz. There are lots of additional resources on our website that were recommended by the speakers, including a video that talks about some of the basic techniques that Doug uses. We are so happy to have you. We hope that you will see you at our next webinar on March 11th. And thanks so much for attending.